What if the NBA had a 4-point line? The idea of a 4-point line has bounced around the league for years, but has remained just that, an idea. But what if these ill-advised bombs that pose no real advantage actually did? How would a 4-pointer change the game? The way offenses are set up, who would take them, and who would be the best at them? Well, there's really only one way to find out. So I added one.
Trey taking a long run and connects from the Laker logo.
You see that? Not the three. What Trae Young did after the three. Not the most conventional celebration, pointing at the spot on the court where he hit a 30-foot bomb. But he's not pointing to just any random spot. He's pointing at the 4-point line. Now, you or I can't see the 4-point line because it's not on this court. But Trae can see it because it's on his court. Years ago, within the Atlanta Hawks practice facility, the organization implemented a 4-point line, 29 feet out from the basket, a little over 5 feet further than the NBA 3-point line. Trae Young can hit these shots because he practices these shots. And the Hawks aren't the only team that have incorporated a 4-point line into their practices. The Bucks have a 4-point shot in their practice facility, as do the 76ers, the Rockets, and many other teams. Here's Milwaukee's practice court with squares indicating 4-pointers. And here's that exact concept playing out in real time. With the NBA seeing an explosion in 3-pointers over the last decade, I'm not sure if adding a 4-point line would be good for the game. And we may not see a 4-point line in the NBA anytime soon. But we have seen it in other places. The Big Three League, which features mostly former NBA players and overseas pros, doesn't quite have a 4-point line, but they do have a 4-point spot, called the Fireball 3, a spot 30 feet away from the rim where shots are worth 4 points. So far this season, the league average from the 4-point shot is 15%. Similar to the Big Three League, the WNBA has included a similar 4-point spot for the last 2 All-Star games. Same conditions as the Big Three League, but this spot is 28 feet from the basket. In the 2023 WNBA All-Star game, out of the total 45 4-pointers attempted, players connected on 12 of them, giving them a 4-point percentage of 26.7%. In the American Basketball Association, any shot past half court is a 4-point shot. So this shot is doable, and it's been incorporated into games to some capacity before. But what if the NBA added a 4-point shot? How far out would it be? How would it change the game we know? And who would be the best 4-point shooters on the planet? In 2020, an article published by the Northeastern Sports Analytics Group went into detail about the possibility of a 4-point line, how the shot would change the anatomy of the game, and exactly what it would look like. Within their data, researchers found that in order for the shot to make sense, the distance would have to be just right. The number they came up with? 30 feet. Any closer, and the shot would be too easy. Any further, and the shot wouldn't be worth taking. We've talked about this concept before, how efficient any given shot is and how that leads to the way teams set up their offense, otherwise known as points per shot. In 2023, the expected shot value for every 2-pointer was 1.096 points. The expected shot value for every 3-pointer was 1.083 points, essentially making both shots about equally as efficient on average. Now, since 1996, the NBA has been keeping track of shot data, where shots were taken, and the success rate of those shots. And with this data, we can figure out the expected shot value not only by category, but by distance. For example, if the 4-point line were, let's say, 24 feet out, we can sort through every shot taken from 24 feet, find the league-wide average for that shot distance, and then just divide 4 points by that number. The league average field goal percentage from 24 feet out is about 35%, which means if the 4-point line was set at 24 feet, the expected shot value would be 1.44 points, far more than both 3-pointers and 2-pointers. So we gotta move it back further. At 25 feet, the expected shot value would be 1.39 points, which is still far too efficient. Keep moving this theoretical line back, and to match the efficiency of 2s and 3s, the 4-point line would have to fall somewhere between 28 and 29 feet away from the basket. But we don't want the league to turn into a 4-point shootout. We need the shot to present enough risk for players to shoot it only on occasion. So if we move the 4-point line back to 30 feet, the expected shot value plummets all the way down to 0.693 points, making it just feasible enough to make sense but not too much to be exploited, giving us a definitive distance of 30 feet for our new 4-point shot. So if the NBA decided to implement this 30-foot 4-pointer, who would be the best 4-point shooters in the league? Well, the answer may not be what you think. Now, this is what a 30-foot shot looks like. And for the sake of this experiment, from here on out, these shots are now 4-pointers, a distance that is far beyond any valuable shot when they're only worth 3 points. But despite this, players keep taking them. The NBA record for the most theoretical 4-pointers made in a game is a 4-way tie between D'Angelo Russell, Stephen Curry, Damian Lillard, and Trae Young, who each made 5 4-pointers in a single game. 5 shots made in a single game from at least 30 feet out. But easily the most absurd display of long bombs in NBA history came from Damian Lillard back in 2020 when he attempted 10 4-pointers in a single game. In total, Dame shot 15 threes, 10 of which were beyond 30 feet out, a feat that would have most players in trade packages the very next day. Ever since the NBA began keeping track of play-by-play data, there have been 51 games where a player has made at least 3 4-pointers. Out of those 51 games, 36 of them came from either Stephen Curry, Damian Lillard, or Trae Young. Because even in a league with the best shooters on the planet, these 3 are among the handful of players that should even be shooting these shots in the first place. But how much would a 4-point line really change the game? Well, it would be impossible to know the ripple effect of such a monumental change. But after painstakingly tracking the shot data and results of each and every game last season, I found that there were only 2 games out of the total 1,314 games played where a 4-point line would have altered the results of the game. That's instances where if the shots made beyond 30 feet were counted as 4-pointers instead of 3-pointers, it would have swung the point total enough to turn the loss into a win, and vice versa. That's 2 games in an entire season. In fact, since 1996, there have been 20 instances where the outcome of a game would have been altered as a direct result of a 4-pointer. Games where a 3-pointer was made to tie the game and send it into overtime. But if the shot was a 4-pointer, it would have outright won the game. So with everything else remaining the same, it's clear that giving an extra point for these bombs wouldn't actually change a whole lot. At least not for those who don't take them. But what about the players who do? Last season alone, across the NBA, there were 2,192 shots taken from at least 30 feet out, which sounds like a lot, but it only made up about 2.6% of all shots taken beyond the 3-point line last season. And of all these now 4-pointers, the league-wide average field goal percentage was just 17.3%. This is a difficult shot. Luka Doncic shot 34 shots from at least 30 feet out last season. He made just 5 of them. Anthony Edwards shot 13, and he made just 1, which would give him a 4-point field goal percentage of 7%. But not all players are abysmal from this distance. Last season, Jordan Poole shot 72 4-pointers and knocked down 32% of them, which makes him as deadly from 4-point range as Ja Morant, De'Aaron Fox, and DeMar DeRozan are from 3-point range. And if that doesn't rattle your brain, Darius Garland attempted 27 4-pointers last season and knocked down 11 of them, giving him an absurd 4-point shooting percentage of 41%, which is exactly the same as his 3-point percentage. But these numbers are from just last season. If we take a look at tracking data dating back to 1996, here's a chart of the players who shot the most 4-pointers throughout the last 27 seasons. And very quickly, you can see just how uncommon shots from this 4-point distance are. Devin Booker is 42nd all-time in shots attempted from at least 30 feet, and he's only taken 109 in his entire career. Carmelo Anthony was a brick from this range. There's Darius Garland. He's a wizard from 30 feet out. Keep going up the chart, and one thing that jumps out is that being a good 3-point shooter doesn't necessarily make a player a good 4-point shooter. Ray Allen shot 157 4-pointers throughout his career and only hit 5.7% of them, whereas Luka Doncic, a notoriously underwhelming 3-point shooter, shoots 4-pointers well above league average. And as we approach the top of this list, the total shot attempts from this range begin to increase almost exponentially. LeBron has attempted 304 4-pointers in his 20-year career. Trae Young has attempted 536 in just 5 seasons. But keep going, and you'll find 2 familiar faces topping the all-time 4-point leaderboard. Damian Lillard and Stephen Curry have virtually shot the same amount of 4-pointers throughout their careers, both of them on relatively excellent field goal percentage. But this is just the total amount of 4-pointers players have attempted throughout their careers. What might be more revealing is the rate at which players shoot these long balls. And if we take a look at 4-pointers attempted per season, there's one player throughout NBA history who is miles above everyone else. It isn't Steph or Dame. It isn't a historically great scorer like James Harden or Kobe Bryant. It isn't a prolific sharpshooter like Reggie Miller or Klay Thompson. If the 4-point line existed, the player who would undeniably be the greatest 4-point shooter of all time is Trae Young. Attempting over 100 4-pointers per season throughout his career, there isn't a single player within Trae Young's galaxy. And the further we dive into the numbers, the more obvious this becomes. With a career shooting percentage of 33% on shots at least 30 feet out, if the 4-point line existed, Trae Young would have an expected shot value of 1.33 points off of 4-pointers, making it the single most valuable shot in basketball outside of uncontested layups. For perspective, in a league with a 4-point line, the best big men in the NBA have a lower points per shot value on contested layups than Trae Young does from 30 feet out, which would make a 30-plus foot bomb by Trae Young more efficient than a defended layup from the reigning MVP. Do you understand how ridiculous that is? And this gap in value only gets larger as we go further from the basket. Kevin Durant is a mid-range juggernaut. His points per shot on mid-range jumpers is 1.1 points. Back up to the 3-point line, and if you take the most accurate volume 3-point shooter in the league, Tyrese Maxey, his 3-pointers are still less valuable than Trae Young's 30-foot 4-pointers. Stephen Curry is the undisputed king of the 3-ball. He single-handedly revolutionized the game with his range. And yet, somehow, Trae Young has already made more career 4-pointers, or shots at least 30 feet out, than Stephen Curry has. It's probably a good thing that this shot doesn't exist in the NBA. But if it did, Trae Young would be the best to ever do it. Here is a visual of each sector on the floor by distance. And here are some of the most prolific scorers from each of those sectors, along with their career points per shot from that distance. From short range, you've got dominant and efficient bigs, players who controlled the paint. But these are some of the most highly contested shots in basketball. So take a step back to the mid-range, and you'll see, for the most part, efficiency actually remains consistent with players like Kawhi, Dirk, and CP3. Keep going back, and you'll find the long 2-point snipers. Despite this being the least efficient shot in basketball, players like Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving have kept this shot alive and well. Now take it one step further, and that extra point from the 3-point line makes 3-pointers in the right hands one of the most lethal shots in the game, with Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, and Ray Allen all gaining at least 1.2 points per shot from this distance. Since 1996, these are the shots you want, who you want taking them, and how much they're worth. And then there's Trae Young, who, in a league where a 30-foot 4-pointer existed, would possess the most valuable shot in basketball, despite taking it from the logo.